I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Now, congratulations, sir.
They expect you to tell your children that the American people no longer have the will to cope with their problems, that the future will be one of sacrifice and few opportunities. My fellow citizens, I utterly reject that view.
We're not, as some would have us believe, doomed to an inevitable decline. I do not believe in a fate that will fall on us no matter what we do. I do believe in a fate that will fall on us if we do nothing.
What a man. We laughed with him, wept with him, rejoiced with him. We saw him bring strength, prosperity, and pride back to America.
Proud to know you.
Proud to know you too, sir.
In short, we saw a president with humility, honesty, and commitment to principle set out to change a nation and end up changing the world.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
If our children, our grandchildren could meet this man, they'd understand Ronald Reagan and learn what greatness is. I'm Charlton Heston. I want to talk to you about making history, American history, and about having your name linked with the legacy of Ronald Reagan's life, his leadership.
Reagan was the leader of the West when the West meant freedom. So he was the leader of the quote-unquote freedom fighters of the G7 and the rest of the world. And we achieved most of that agenda, not all, but most of it under his leadership. And you had the sense at that time that when you were dealing with Reagan, that you were having a conversation with history.
You see, there is a place where our great-great-great-grandchildren will be able to meet President Ronald Reagan and understand his heart and soul. It's the place he loved the most, the place he and his wife Nancy called Rancho del Cielo, the ranch in the sky near Santa Barbara, California. Their home since 1974 when he was governor of California. Here's the one place on earth to meet the man, Ronald Reagan.
Early on in the administration, we'd been there 3 or 4 months when the president called me into the Oval Office, and when I got there, he was sitting there with the 3-month schedule, and he looked at me and said, "You know, Mike, there's no time for the ranch on this schedule." He smiled and looked at me and he said, "You know, you can tell me just about anything and I'll probably do it, but you're not going to tell me when I'm going to go to that ranch." He said, "I happen to think the more I go to that ranch, the longer I'm going to live. So we're going to go to the ranch." I couldn't argue with that.
For a couple of weeks before, when we were talking privately, he would let on that he was certainly looking forward to getting back to the ranch.
The president referred to it as his open cathedral. We on the cabinet knew it only as the Western White House.
It gave him a good opportunity to do some in-depth thinking himself, so that when he did come back with the rest of us, either to meet with us down at our headquarters in Santa Barbara, or when we got back to Washington, he would be fresh with a lot of ideas and have his own thoughts about what ought to be done.
It was at the ranch that he signed the Economic Recovery Act, the largest tax cut in American history. It was here that President and Mrs. Reagan hosted Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, Margaret Thatcher, Mikhail and Raisa Gorbachev, and other world leaders.
When President Reagan gave President Gorbachev that felt cowboy hat, he just took it naturally and stuck it on. Well, it was backwards. And I went over to the staff and I said, that hat's on backwards. It is? Yes. And he's smiling for the cameras, and I know the people that are going to say, oh, he's got it on back, and I didn't want to embarrass Mr. Gorbachev. We stop and turn it around, and they just let it go. And he was sitting there like this, but the hat was on backwards.
Ronald Reagan was at ease among world leaders, but he didn't need the trappings of high office. He lived very simply at the ranch, much of which he built with his own hands.
He didn't have an ego, but the trappings of the office obviously put a lot of pressure on you. I know this is where he rejuvenated his batteries. His form of relaxation was hard physical labor. We were going to just build a fence around a little orchard that we had up here. The president wanted to do it out of telephone poles or utility poles. The president designed them, and they are very unique for a person if you really look at it.
Very scientific business.
When you held Ronald Reagan's arm, you were dealing with absolute steel. He was in fabulous physical shape. This is what he loved to do because it kind of brought him close to his version of America and what America was. The strength and the capacity to grow and the clarity that you had from the top of the mountain and the brilliance of the landscape and the horizons, east and west. The ranch, I thought, symbolized a lot of America to him and its potential and its splendor. And he worked it every day and loved it every minute.
I was lucky enough to go up to the ranch with President Reagan on several occasions, and that's what he loved. And he loved to clear brush, but that was him. And he was riding his horse around. He used to say, there's nothing better for the inside of a man than the outside of a horse. And all of that spirit is there at the ranch. And it captured the American part of Ronald Reagan. And I think it's important that people have a chance to share that.
His richness of spirit came from values like hard work, honesty, devotion. One example of his cherished values can still be seen at the ranch at a place called Heart Rock. Here the president carved his initials and those of the love of his life, Nancy. That's what makes the Reagan Ranch such a treasure. It's a window into the life and character of Ronald Reagan and the traditional values he cherished.
This is how it is. This is how he made it. And it's like he could show up right now. We could go riding. This was him, the common man, who could relate to presidents, kings, and queens and make them listen. But he was a common person, thoughtful, down to earth. He meant what he said and said what he meant. And this is the epitome of who Ronald Reagan was.
What a shame if Rancho del Cielo had been lost to future generations, and it almost was. When it first came up for sale, unlike other presidential properties, the Clinton administration refused to protect it. The California Assembly also failed to act.
Well, the ranch of Ronald Reagan is in many ways reflective of him personally, of his character and personality, just as in many ways Monticello reflects Thomas Jefferson or Mount Vernon reflects George Washington, places that both of those presidents loved very much and which reflects their personality in so many aspects.
Finally, just as a wealthy Democrat was about to buy the ranch and change it forever, the Young America's Foundation stepped in. Ron Robinson and his board risked everything to raise a down payment, incurring a huge debt but saving the ranch.
This is the site we had to protect. There's no other place that has the significance for the conservative movement as this ranch does. Reagan plotted his plan to get elected as president there, and to him it was the very symbol of individual freedom that is so treasured by conservatives. So this is a site that we just absolutely have to protect.
I think the preservation cause is sacred because it's about not only places, but it's about ideas and values. And there's absolutely no substitute for being where Jefferson lived, for being where the Reagans lived,
to understand their vision for this country.
And I think it's particularly important that we save the homes of our modern presidents, let history take its course, because I think we're going to find that people like Ronald Reagan 50 years from now and 100 years from now are looked upon as the George Washington, perhaps, of their generations. And they may easily get the 1 million people a year that we welcome today. It's a very, very thrilling thing to think that Americans will always have these places to go back to.
Today, a rustic ranch in the California hills stands quietly waiting to share the legacy of the last lion of the 20th century. But to appreciate that legacy, we need to remember what things were like when Ronald Reagan became our president.
The inflation was at 18%, 19%. Interest rates were double-digit. There were gas lines.
We had the worst economic crisis, worst since the Great Depression of the 1930s.
This was the Brezhnev period, the height of the Cold War.
The helicopters were falling apart in the desert. We had no military capabilities. The country was not respected.
And then perhaps equally serious was the spirit of the American people. President Reagan's predecessor had called it a malaise that the people were in. Ronald Reagan said the malaise was not with the people, it was with the leadership. And then he went on to prove that that was true, that by his leadership he revived, I think, the spirit of the American people.
Ronald Reagan's leadership was rooted in character and guided by principle, not by polls. This must be passed on to future generations. Yet today, that legacy is under attack. Liberal politicians, professors, and media pundits are rewriting history, discrediting President Reagan and his achievements. They've labeled the Reagan years the decade of greed. They've called Ronald Reagan a cheerleader for selfishness. They've blamed him for everything from cracked babies to the spread of AIDS. But by trying to destroy a great man's example, what they're really doing is robbing future generations of their heritage. That's why we must preserve now the one place that speaks most powerfully about his life and legacy, the Reagan Ranch. Thousands of young people will come here to be inspired by the president's example, his way of life.
What we've got to do is make sure that young people can still hear our view, which is that Ronald Reagan is the greatest president of the 20th century. We want them to know the truth, and we're going to make sure that we shout the truth loud and clear.
There's always the chance that people will just remember Ronald Reagan as a successful president, but not realize that he was for limited government, individual freedom, and a strong national defense. And we want to make sure that those principles are continuously conveyed to young people of this country.
They'll also meet the conservative giants of our day there and be trained in the principles and values that made Reagan a great leader and America a great nation. That's why President and Mrs. Reagan were so thrilled when Young America's Foundation purchased the ranch. The president has been closely involved with the foundation for over 20 years.
When Ronald Reagan was president, I was a student in the Young America's Foundation programs. I traveled to the White House, one of the many occasions when he hosted Young America's Foundation students.
Each year after my election in 1980, we hosted Young America's Foundation at the White House. Together we worked to accomplish much of what has come to be known as the Reagan Revolution. Much has been achieved since Young America's Foundation's first conferences in 1979 and 1980.
He was all about educating young people, and that's what Young America's Foundation is all about, helping the next generation understand these ideas of freedom.
It's important for us to let the young people know that there was not just a personality named Ronald Reagan, but a set of ideas that this man believed in that worked and made the country better. And in the future, young people are going to face the same kind of challenges. They happen, you know, there's no generation that's not going to be faced with very serious challenges. Understanding Ronald Reagan's ideas, understanding how he coped with the challenges of America in his day will help these future generations cope with their challenges tomorrow.
Every generation needs to learn the lessons over and over and over again. So in no small way, studying the Reagan tax cuts of 81 and 82 will not only be a reminder but will be a refresher course in incentive-oriented economics.
Ronald Reagan always considered young people, both as governor and then later as president of the United States, as a very important audience. That's why he worked with Young America's Foundation. That's why he hosted us every year of his presidency at the White House.
When I first met Ronald Reagan, I was still in my teens. I actually camped out on his back lawn, and I was in Youth for Reagan, and there was something I really had to talk to him about. And sure enough, at 7 o'clock in the morning, actually after we'd been shooed away and we're walking down the driveway to leave, Reagan came running after us, and they had shaving cream on his face. His shirt wasn't on. He goes, wait a minute. If you can spend the night in my back lawn, you can certainly have a few minutes with me. Now, what's the problem? Well, I mean, he won my heart right there.
Why at the ranch? Well, President Reagan's biographer, Edmund Morris, said it well. Go to the ranch. That's where you'll find his soul.
How much will you take for the place?
Oh, you can't sell heaven.
I've known Ronald Reagan not only as my president, but also as my friend for over 35 years. I believe he'll go down in history as perhaps the greatest president of the 20th century. But only if we act now to preserve his true legacy before the liberals rewrite history and bury the truth forever. The task is urgent. As President Reagan said, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. But he also said, there is a flickering spark in all of us, which if struck at just the right age can light up the rest of our lives. We want that spark to catch fire in the hearts and minds of young Americans who will be inspired to become America's next Ronald Reagans. But first, there's work to be done, a lot of work. Preserving the ranch and its artifacts and opening its doors to the American public for the first time ever. It's a huge task and hugely important.
There's always the risk of fire on the property. I mean, there's always the risk of the materials in the house itself deteriorating. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to preserve and protect this particular historic treasure. It is a very open place. It's a ranch. It is a home. It is not a place where everything is enclosed in glass. So the challenges we face in preserving it as it has its great significance, which was an open working ranch to President Reagan, is a great challenge. And to not have the ability to do that right from the outset of this project will mean that certain treasures will be lost, certain aspects will be lost to American history that we desperately need to protect and to preserve.
As a member of the Reagan Ranch, your name will be permanently engraved on Freedom Wall and be seen by all future visitors. With a larger gift, your name will be listed on the permanent map of the Reagan Ranch. The specific acreage you helped preserve will be marked in your name. For more information, please review the materials enclosed with this video. Then, let your heart guide you as you decide what you can do for this great man.
If there was anything that meant a lot to him personally, it was the ranch. And so therefore, for anyone who is a Reagan fan or who feels a debt of gratitude to Ronald Reagan, I think an investment in Young America's Foundation program for continuing and expanding the role of the Reagan Ranch as a part of American history is a tremendously good investment.
If you loved Ronald Reagan, if you respected what he did, if you admired what he stood for, then this is the place to say thanks, right here.
I remember a man who was more than he seemed, much more than a face on the silver screen. And I remember a man who broke down the walls by the strength of what he believed.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared so we may be always free.
Yes, you and I saw greatness walk our land. We'll never forget him or be able to thank him enough. But we can save and forever protect the one place closest to his heart. We can open its doors and share it with those who follow us. By doing that, we can say, thank you, Ronald Reagan. Thank you for reminding us of the greatness of our country, America. Thank you, and God bless you for making us proud again.